Hello all, good afternoon, and my name is Bharath Yaragatti. I lead the customer engineering here at Niveus Solutions, and we are a premium partner of Google Cloud across app infra and data modernization. So before I get into the introduction of the panel that we have today and the topic that we're discussing, right? So I would like to take a minute to quote what Jeffrey Moore once said, right? So organizations without the data analytics are basically blind and deaf and wandering onto the web, right? Basically like a deer onto the freeway, right? It's a beautiful analogy, which basically means that if you're not really analyzing your data and making decisions, your one is in for a disaster and you're just basically wandering directionless, right? And that we can clearly see the kind of impact data has been creating in the days, right from every other application that we use, the kind of analytics that we get with respect to our banking, the spend part of it. Most interesting is on the healthcare apps, right? So I've been using a couple of them personally. So it's very interesting to see how accurate predictions and forecasts are, sent to me based on my intake, the kind of calories I'm trying to burn. One of the points which was very interesting to me was, right? So there's a local dish called patrode. While most of your rice, eggs, etc., can be quantified very easily, it's difficult when your mom makes a very local dish. It's called patrode, right? It's made with leaf and some basin and stuff. So I was trying to figure out, how do I enter or quantify this particular thing on the app so that it gives me back, accurate predictions on this. Funny enough, I tried all kind of things like a leaf roll, wedge leaf roll or something, and I couldn't really find it. So I thought, okay, why not go and try the local word for it and see how the app responds. And I searched for patrode, and I was surprised. It gave me, an accurate calculation for that particular local dish. And then I, out of curiosity, went on searching for more local dishes across India. And trust me, almost every other local dish is there with the right quantified, details about the proteins, the fat, and the calories that it has. And it's because of this that the app is able to give me, because of the massive amount of data they've collected, it's able to give me the right accurate predictions and prescriptions for me to, course correct whenever I go wrong, right? So that's the power of data. And a lot of organizations already have data, which if we are able to collect, transform, analyze, and visualize in the right way, they can definitely, drive the data-based decisions which the organization, basically can make. So with that, we today have with us Mr. Rajat Pandit, right? So he's the head of, customer engineering for South of India and for Google Cloud, and he's had experience of working with organizations like HCL, Yahoo, Time Inc. and Accenture prior. So I'm sure a lot of his experience of working very closely with the clients is going to add a lot of value to our topics today, which is how to make faster decisions, data-driven decisions with Google Cloud. So welcome, Rajat, to this discussion, and thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
We also have Rupesh Shetty, who's the business head for data modernization and Niveus Solutions. So he's had stints, working with data analytics teams of Geo, IBM, and Accenture in the past. So his insights would also be useful for the audience that we have today across industries like BFSI, healthcare, and manufacturing to get the insights on how these companies basically plan their whole data journeys. Right. So welcome, Rupesh, to this discussion.
Thanks a lot, Bharath.
All right, great. So let's get started. Let's start with the basics, right? Basically the challenges or the kind of infrastructure that the organizations have. Almost every other organization is undergoing a digital transformation journey today, right? Which has only been accelerated because of the whole pandemic situation we have had in the last 1.5 years, right? So Rajat, how important it is, for the organizations to have a proper data strategy in place, right? Under the bigger umbrella of the digital transformation.
Sure, but I think that's an important starting point, right? I think it's important to understand why data strategy is important in the first place, right? And really the idea of having a data strategy is to start leveraging data as a managed used asset, right? Like you would use a laptop or a hardware, anything that you procure. And how do you get value out of it over a period of time, as opposed to something that is generated as part of an existing process. So that's really the core of having a data strategy itself. And it starts with understanding what sort of data goes in and out of a business process, and how do you capture that and make sure you can make good use of it. And really, from an importance point of view, if I were to sort of articulate, I would say there are 5 big areas that could really be areas that would impact your business if you had a strong data strategy. The first one is around building a data-driven organization. So how do you actually go about making decisions which are unbiased, based on facts rather than opinions, and make informed decisions around it, right? The second part is understanding customers and trends, and how are your customers are actually interacting with your business, your product, your services, and what sort of what is the feedback loop there, whether it is in terms of interactions, customer satisfaction, frequency, recency, those sort of attributes around it. And what sort of trends are you seeing? Like, can you spot patterns in terms of, is there a particular time of the day they use the product more? Or is there a particular demographic of customer base that you use the product more? Right. The third part is to build smarter services and products. Now, analytics is not just around collecting a lot of data, but being able to inform some of the decision paths in your product and make them a bit more intelligent. So everyone's familiar, hopefully, with the Google Photos application, for instance, right? Yep. It comes up with these great recommendations of people together, or a time you were together in a certain location on a certain date, right? It brings back those great memories. These are great examples of building smarter services and products. And that's all based on collecting data. So when you take a picture, it's not just taking a picture, it's taking the geolocation, the time, probably identifies people in the photograph, the way you've tagged them in the past, and be able to use all of this data to build products so that they can interact with you in a meaningful and a resonating way, right?
Absolutely.
The fourth point around this is to have a robust internal operations mechanism. So how do you actually look how your operations internally is working? How's the organization functioning? And make sure that you identify within the business process for a business unit, what are your areas of bottleneck? What are the areas of optimization? Where can you leverage predictive analytics to forecast some of those things rather than actually taking a looking back view of the data? And lastly, I mean, the important point is also not just around making products better or services better, but also thinking about new business lines, right? A lot of organizations collect data, which is something of a byproduct for you, right? But could be a gold mine for other organizations. So some of the examples of, if you're a large retailer, for instance, you have historical data of order history for hundreds and thousands of customers, millions of customers over 15, 20 years. How do you use that data to then decide or build a recommendation engine, for instance, right? Now, suddenly companies who are looking to upsell and cross-sell, they could leverage a service of data, which was basically sitting in your warehouse. You were not doing anything with it. And how do you create a revenue source around it? Another example for one of the other EV manufacturers that we work with, they were looking at monitoring some of the driving patterns of customers and make that data available as a signal to insurance providers to underwrite the risk associated with it. So this is data that was sitting in their warehouse, and they didn't really do very much with it, but with the ability of having a data strategy, it was thinking about how to run the business, but also grow the business as well, right? So probably that's a sort of longish answer to your question, but hopefully it covers a well-rounded view of the value.
Yeah, I think, That's I think brilliantly summarized, right? The data org having their own internal informed decision-making patterns, the customer trends, servicing, which you rightly pointed out, right? If you're not able to use the data to service your customers, then it's as good as dead data, right? And of course, the operational mechanisms. And I think the use case which you were talking about, I'm sure Rupesh would have more to share as we go further on a similar use cases where analytics on the vehicular part of it, how it's helping one of our clients also, right? But having said that, while we're trying to put a whole data transformation journey or the whole drafting the data journey itself comes with a lot of challenges, right? So Rupesh, in your experience of interacting with customers while drafting their whole end-to-end data journey, right? It could be somewhere midway through where they're midway through the digital transformation, or let's say they're commence the whole data journey, right? So what are the typical challenges that you've come across while drafting this particular journey?
Thanks, Bharath. This is an excellent question, right? So everybody out there as a company wants to put up a data journey, and they, I would say, they have put up a data journey to some extent, but I think people realize a lot of things as to what they have, what they don't have, right? While putting up the data journey. So let me kind of take a step back and see from me being a consultant, right? So what are the kind of discussions I had with all my customers in the past, right? So the first thing you start off with while putting up a data journey is to kind of define the use case, right? So everybody says that, okay, this is my use case, this is my business problem. How can data solve it, right? So the first and foremost part that I think pretty much any discussion lands up as a starter discussion between a client and a service provider would be to kind of define the use cases, right? Saying that, okay, this is my use case. How can data help me kind of in realizing some benefits, right? So if I put up a data journey, what are the use cases and what are the benefits out of the way? So that is the first part. Now, as we go along those preparatory sessions, right, saying that these are the use cases, these are the benefits, now we agree on. Now, let's look at what kind of data will help you realize those use cases, right? So there is a second step around it where the challenges which we normally see is saying that, okay, we have the data now, it's lying in so many systems, so many silos. How do we kind of gather the data, right? Because one use case would typically span across multiple systems, right? So they will say, okay, now let's start defining the data. And then now when we define the data, we need to have a proper dictionary in place for the data, metadata in place. It should not be in people's minds, right? Saying that, okay, this is where the data lies, this is what it means. So that is the second challenge we normally face, saying that, okay, so we have the data in place, but we don't know exactly where it is or in what shape it is, or how do we define each and every structure of it. Right? So that is the second part. The third part, which every company out there who's kind of defining a data journey, right, for themselves is the quality of the data itself, right? So so they say that they have the data, but we know that the data may not be right. We know that there may be issues with it in terms of how good the data is, right, for the specific use case. So data quality becomes a third challenge, which I thought I will highlight and say that while everybody kind of there are two sets of companies, right? One set of companies would say actually that my data is quite good, and you kind of go away with it, and over a period of time they realize that the quality is not that good. And there are some who actually are quite upfront and saying that, okay, my data quality is a problem, so can you please do maybe an exercise to understand how my data is and how it can help for this use case. So these are the typical challenges that you face while a data journey. But good thing is we have solutions for all of this, right? I think we can talk about what solutions we have in place, but these are the challenges that we normally encounter when we speak to customers.
Great. Thanks for that, Rupesh. So, like you rightly kind of called it out, right? Transparency is the key here. So while we are talking to your customers, it's great if they can open up and give the current as is state, right? Whether it's structured, unstructured, or what kind of data sources are there, and which all could help us put a better data journey. So if they can upfront, call it out, that would really help us, put a more efficient strategy together, right? So bang on there. Coming back to you, Rajat. So I understand that Google Cloud, like even Rupesh mentioned, right, there are solutions for almost all kinds of challenges that we are going to face while drafting it, right? So how has Google Cloud, basically been helping in transforming or aiding this whole data journey for their clients, especially what are the key differentiators or the tools and solutions that are basically available within the ecosystem of Google Cloud, and the key differentiators compared to the other players in the market, or basically how can they help in this data journey in your experience?
Sure, Bharath. I think it is important that I take you a bit to the history a little bit to explain why our customers see us as a partner in their data and analytics journey, right? Our history was starting off from a B2C model where we were working in the ads business, the search business. And very similar to our customers today, we were trying to solve the same set of problems, except we were trying to do this at a planet scale, right? We had huge amounts of data coming in from various signals to figure out what was the best customer experience, what the best search results were. And so, being able to scale to manage the inflow of, petabytes and large volumes of data was not a new problem to us, right? And we solved it in a way that meant that we could solve it for the demands and scale for Google, right? And the challenge at the time was that we built these solutions for the infrastructure for inside of Google. The infrastructure at Google was very, very unique and particular to Google itself. So it was not something that we could write as a software and make available to other people, right? Got it. What we did then through Google Cloud was effectively make this available as a public service. So we still abstract away the Google's internal infrastructure and make it available as Google Cloud in a way where it is familiar, and so people can use that, but they don't necessarily have to worry too much about the internals of the product itself. right? So that's a bit of the background of the history. So these products have been designed so that they can work at scale, economically viable, and can perform in near real time, right? So, but in terms of now, what that meant in terms of differentiating ourselves, right? We learn from our own experiences, we solve for our own problems, and hence when we talk to our customers, the products normally differentiate themselves naturally. So the first one is around ease of operations itself. So from an analytics point of view, we are probably the only few very providers who are serverless, right? If you're provisioning a warehouse, you don't have to necessarily worry about the amount of storage or compute upfront, and we scale out based on your need. What that really means is that it takes a lot of your effort and time that was typically spent in managing, tweaking, scaling, backup, restore, all of that stuff of your warehouse to focusing on analytics and what you're trying to derive meaning out of that data. So that is one of the core benefits. And we do that primarily through our BigQuery platform. And the way we do that is we separate out the compute and storage side of things. What that means is that you can store large amounts of data, but that storage is not tied to compute. If you compare it with a traditional data warehouse system where you have to buy both of them together, right? So you can scale both of those dimensions independently. And when you fire a query, depending on the quality of the query, it applies compute to it just in time, and hence the serverless aspect around it. What that means is if you're running a query which is requiring a certain amount of CPU, we provide you the amount of compute, it runs the query, you just pay for that duration, and we're done with it. The other nice part of that serverless aspect is that we automatically take your data and move it out if it's not being used for 30 days to a cheaper storage tier, which means that suddenly if you want to use decades and decades of data, it doesn't cost you, right? Just because you're not using 3 decades old data every day, you don't have to pay the real-time cost for it, right?
Absolutely.
You can still access it whenever you need it, right? So that's the first part around it. The other part is around performance and scalability, and I think I broadly covered that based on the history. This was based on an internal product called Dremel, which we've now made available as a BigQuery. This is never constrained from a resources point of view. Our mechanisms of being able to allocate compute resources as and when required helps you address all your business SLAs around it. The third part is around democratizing insights. Now, as a Googler, I can tell you a lot of our decisions are based on data, right? And which means that we make the same data available to the analysts, the managers, to the leaders, to individual contributors, so that they have the same view of the business and they're thinking about the business the same way. And being able to democratize that means being able to provide them tools that matches the skills of the particular resource, right? So while we provide you BigQuery as the backend, you can still use Google Sheets as the front end if you're familiar with spreadsheets, right? You can use Google Studio, Data Studio if you're familiar with using dashboards. So there are tools to meet you where you are from a skill set point of view, but it also unlocks the capability of democratizing insights itself. And the last part, and it's a very powerful one, is around being able to build real-time and event-driven architectures. And what that means is the power of data is now in the now, rather than what happened 5 minutes ago, a day ago, 24 hours ago, right? And a perfect, very strong example of this is, remember you go shopping online and you start looking for a TV, right? You've made the purchase, but then you keep going from one website to the other and you still see ads of TVs. So you've made the purchase, right? You could create really different experiences if you could feed that order cycle back into your personalization in real time and be able to say, look, this person's already bought a TV. Let's position ads that are adjacent to a TV, maybe speakers, maybe a TV camera, right? Make it much more relevant. So those are 5 differentiators that I would like to call out.
Great. So I think democratized data, what you spoke about, is very relevant to what we're talking today also, right? In fact, how is this going to basically help make faster decisions and across, hierarchy, like you said, right? The same kind of data is made available for your managers, for the analytics, for the leadership, so that they can use this data to make, the right set of decisions. And definitely, I think we have seen it in Google, right? Like you rightly said, back in the days, it used to be the same ad that used to get, repeated, and there was no customization or personalization for that, right? There were a few aspects like age and, category and a couple of other things considered to, provide ads. But today it can be very customized, very precise, even to the location, where you're based out of, right? Depending on what kind of purchase you have made, very location oriented products can be pushed to you in a more meaningful way, which is a win-win for both the person who's trying to sell you that and also the person who's trying to buy it and make a right decision for it, right? So great on that part, Rajat. So basically, Rupesh, coming back to you, right? So while there are these set of tools, like Rajat mentioned, there's BigQuery, and for all the structuring of the data, there are various tools for visualizations. There's Data Studio, and of course, there's Looker as well, right, which can be used. But while you're drafting this whole data strategy journey for your customers, right? So, what are the expected outcomes of it? Like, what are the success criteria that you would define in order to eventually go back and validate, like, whatever data journey that you have put together and is being implemented is moving in the right direction?
Thanks, Bharath. Yeah, so I mean, good points what Rajat talked about. I want to just kind of add on to that and maybe make it more relevant from a business perspective, right? What a customer is looking for. So what are they trying to measure, right? So every department would look at in terms of if it is a product kind of a base that they have, right? For the customers, they want to see how to kind of recommend the right products, right? Or maybe even make a product which is suitable for the audience, right? You talked about the healthcare apps, right? So unless you kind of understand what the customer wants, you cannot actually define the product, right? And its journey itself. So I would say one of the key business outcome is to kind of get the right product to the right customer at the right time, right? So these are the things I would say as a mantra that anybody should follow. So this includes everything from getting the right customers through the acquisition channels, understanding the customer needs, their behavior, and as well as serving those customers, right? So for all of this, I would say there is a good business outcome in terms of maybe in terms of getting more customers to your product or service, in terms of retaining those customers, providing the right service. So these are the key business outcomes that I see, right? And most of the customers are looking for this. Now, when we look at from a data strategy perspective, if we build a data warehouse, a data lake, right, for the business users, I also try to look at it from a what capabilities can be given within the organization as well, right? So one of the things that can come out is how do you track all this business performance, right? So is there a way to do this in a simple way? There may be tools around it, but is there, like we talk about natural language as a medium, right? So we have all these tools, bots working with us. The people are used to saying that, okay, let me type it in a natural language way and get the insights. So making those insights available to the business community within an organization is also key, right? And it should be usable in a way that they understand. It's not about just writing a technical knowledge or maybe a tool, right? So that is one part of it, but can we make it more conversational, more natural language so that they can query and find out insights on their own, right? So this includes the customer experience, both internal to the organization, as well as there is another thing in terms of what you can do for your end customers itself, right? So getting the right customers, understanding their needs and serving it. So these are the two plays that I see, one more internal and other more external to the customers. So I would measure any kind of data strategy with this kind of business outcomes.
Absolutely. And NLP, since you mentioned it, right? So it doesn't matter which industry vertical it is, right? Whether it's healthcare, BFSI, manufacturing, anywhere. We are heading towards a world where I would want all the information, whether it's predictions or visualizations, by just speaking to my phone, right? I just need to say that what are the stats for the sales on a specific product for the last month look like, and this eventually gets converted into a query, which is then fed to the API, which is going to fetch it, provided you have the data, and gives me the right set of. This wouldn't be analytics. This is basically a record of what's happening, and then based on this, if I were to ask, like, so what should my projections be for the subsequent month? If this can fetch and give me the insights specific to what I want, then I think that purpose is served, right? It could be again a banking query or even a healthcare related query. So great on that.
Yeah,
I think we pretty much.
In fact, but just to add to that, we are talking about conversational AI more on the operational side, right? I see this as a vision that it will go more towards the analytics side as well.
Analytics,
right? Like you said,
yeah.
we are doing a more of a ticket fulfillment or a movie booking, everything on the operational side through those bots, right? But I think as a future, there would be a lot of analytical insights or queries coming in through these bots as well, right? So that is, I think, going to be very, very useful to the business community itself.
Absolutely. I think even our discussions with the clients are towards a direction where their requirements are in this direction, like you rightly pointed out. So I think we've covered the challenges and the part of it, right? So I think moving on to the best practices part. So Rajat, since there are audience from various verticals, based on your experience in partnering with the industries across these various verticals, right? What are some of the best practices that the organizations need to follow, right, while implementing the data analytics strategy or the roadmap in general?
Sure, Bharath. So the whole analytics journey itself is sort of an innovation program, right? And it is there, as I mentioned earlier, to unlock new business opportunities, to derive value out of data, and so on. So broadly across working various industries, they all have sort of different drivers and different nuances around it. But if you were to look at the common themes around it, the first one is to actually run it like a program, right? That's the first important part, because that anchors this towards a direction, set some KPIs, some goals that you want to measure, right? And have a business unit level strategy for data, right? So rather than have a central strategy, have a business unit level strategy, all aligned to what the overall goal for the business is. And what that allows you to do is to sort of decentralize that and bring local knowledge, rather than having one set of team responsible for how they should look like across the entire organization, and they might not have the local knowledge. Localize that and then bubble that up at a higher level. So that's the first part around it, right? That gives the diversity of thoughts around it, make sure that every part of the department also progresses in their journey, as opposed to one area that is more agile and the other one isn't so much. The second part is around leveraging partners. So this is very, very important, because a lot of organizations tend to, particularly the ones that are very engineering focused, engineering heavy, it is almost not built here problem. But really, the partners are your catalysts or accelerators for innovation, right? Both from a technical know-how point of view to build partners, so the ISVs and SaaS providers, leverage them, right? They can help you accelerate some of the problems that you're trying to solve, and not worry so much about unit economics upfront, because it is an economies of scale problem, right? When you hit that scale, then you worry about the cost and not worry about it upfront to start with. But moving further is more important in that sense. Absolutely. The second part, or the third part in this case, would be the ability to build the culture of delivering personalized experiences. So considering internal and external stakeholders the same way. So as you think about product innovation, think about what experiences your ops folks would like to have, your business leaders would like to have as well, and be able to do that at scale, right? So if they want to go back 10 years in history and figure out what happened, they should be able to get that kind of information as well. Which obviously brings me back to the next point, which is around scale. So choose a platform which will scale with you, but not scale the cost at the same rate, right? And that's an important part, because these things are sort of on the back of a business case. If you create value, but the cost of creating value is higher than the value gets created, it sort of nullifies the effect itself. So make sure that you pick something that scales from a performance point of view, but doesn't scale at a cost point of view. And the last part is to have a long-term transformational roadmap as well, not just short-term tactical, I have to solve this use case or this problem, but think broader term. How do you bring the data from different silos, different time periods of freshness, put it together in a single place, and then say, what do I build on top of it, right? Rather than say, I want to solve for this particular problem, and as a result, I will have this backend. Because that helps you address all the things, that challenges that Rupesh talked about, data quality, governance, lineage, explainability, and obviously the usual upcoming compliance challenges that we come across, like suddenly something changes and you have to figure out which are my data sources that have PII information, how do I go about capturing that, right? So those are the best practices I'd like to cover.
Yeah, I think breaking it down is the key here, right? So like you rightly said, instead of having an org-wise strategy for data, it's better we break it down for the business unit-wise, and they within that have both short-term goals and long-term goals, which are aligned with the organizational goals. And I think that's when they'll even be able to track it and monitor the progress, and even course correct as and when required, of course, with the help of the partners who have done this in the past, and help them in the achieving the larger object. Yeah. All right, Rupesh, coming to the other part, right? Like you rightly called it out, organizations already have a lot of data, right? Some would be structured, some would be semi-structured. So while commencing this whole journey, what is it that the organization should focus on at the beginning, or even for the longer term, right? So whether it's a semi-structured data that's already present in their system, and what are the best practices in understanding the customers better, across channels, right? So what are your views on these 2-3 points?
Sure, sure. Across industries, across companies, now the channels have grown up like anything, right? So now the customer touch points, if you see, is I mean, you can pretty much have every product or service out there as a website, a mobile app, a customer care email address, a call center to handle customer calls, and then there is all these operational systems, right, where the customer data is getting captured, right? So suppose you go to a store, you have a customer coming in, purchasing a product from the store, right? So you have the point of sale systems. So now, so here is a customer who is doing some transactions in your store, and this, it may be the same customer who is actually browsing your website, browsing through your mobile app. Maybe there are some other customers who are calling up your call center for some service related issues or some problems, right? So that if you see the number of channels that the customer interacts with you has grown up tremendously over the last few years, right? So so what do we do? So we have data lying across different silos, again, more applications, every application having some part of the customer, right, recorded in terms of the transactions, in terms of behavior on the website, mobile app, or maybe on the call center side in terms of service requests, right? So what could be the best way to understand, right? So the best way to understand is to create a customer profile, right? Saying that, okay, this is a customer, so he is actually doing this kind of transactions at the store level, this kind of behavior on the website, mobile app, and this are the kind of things which he's looking for from a service perspective, right? So unless we kind of build up a complete integrated profile, I wouldn't say the analytics would be of much help, right? So as a best practice that we recommend to all the organizations, saying that some of the data is lying within your system, some of the data is lying in website, mobile apps, some are actually there is also a third part of it, right? So there is entire social media platforms, right? So you have a handle there on the Twitter side or a Facebook page. How do we know that what customers are liking about your product or service, right? So you need to capture that as well. So now we talked about all the data that is available for us. We need to just get that into a place and put up a customer profile, right? So that's how you understand the customer behavior. So I would say the only and the best way to do it is first build up a customer profile and then build analytics on top of it, right? So analytics could be in the form of saying that, okay, these are the kind of customers we want, right? Segmenting the customers, saying that, okay, these are the kind of segments that we want to target as a future customer. So put that as a principle for your customer acquisition teams, right? Then there could be in terms of how do we retain this customer. So what is your retention strategy, right? So you need to know how people are interacting with the systems, what are their problems, why are they churning, and put up a good retention strategy in place. And the third could be in terms of general customer service, right? So which channel is good for each customer, right? So there may be people who love to interact on the phone. They are not comfortable on the mobile app or sending a request on the chat message. But there are maybe some others who interact on the mobile app chat, or maybe some others who actually put up something on the social media page, right? So the right channel needs to be identified, and that comes through the segmentation of the customers. But unless you build the customer profile, you will not be able to get there. So I would say the first best practice is to build the customer profile and then kind of build analytics on top of it through either models like in terms of customer acquisition, retention models, or customer service models.
Great. I think segmentation, customer profiling, and then analytics. I think that's the route that needs to be followed, right? We have almost 83, 85 participants. So a request to you also, if you have any questions, there is a Q&A section, right? Please feel free to type in your questions there, and we will take the last probably 10, 15 minutes to see and answer a couple of these questions, right? All right. So moving on, Rajat, in this whole fast-paced environment, right? So how do you plan giving the right set of user experience for the analytics user, right, with a very shorter turnaround time? So what are some of the insights into achieving this particular objective also, which is a part and parcel of the whole data roadmap of the data strategy?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, for adoption of any kind of new area of technology, the user experience is very, very critical. Right? I mean, it has to have the lowest friction, lowest threshold to actually get started and get using. I like the ideas that Rupesh gave earlier around the conversational AI and being able to have voice activated stuff, not just from an operational point of view, but another common theme that I've seen is in call centers when these conversational AI services are used, they also used to understand sentiment, right? So this is another dimension of the same data, right? Where you are getting the data, but also understanding what your CSAT looks like as well, right? So that experience is another example of what I want to talk about. But equally, it's important to try and embed analytics value delivered in tooling that they're already familiar with, right? And in Google Cloud, we do this through Big Sheets, which is effectively Google Sheets backed by BigQuery. And the magic of that is, in two ways. It's not a new tool. Everyone who's spent any reasonable amount of time in IT would have used spreadsheets. But what it allows you to do is to use the same ideology of using spreadsheets, but backed by the power of BigQuery. So you could build a machine learning model, for instance, deploy that in BigQuery and call that through Google Sheets itself. So for the end user, it's just literally using a formula like they use typically, right? So there is that. The other bit is around the ability to drill down to data and be able to get to insights. So typically people have canned custom reports, and then they want the next level of report, they have to go back to an analyst to create a custom report. How do you give them the ability to slice and dice the data to the extent they want to do it, right?
Yeah.
That obviously poses a challenge around access management and making sure that people with the right level of access have access to the right set of information. Right. So through Looker, we provide that access management and the ability to do that dicing and slicing of the data. Another aspect around the experience of being able to get data is the freshness of data, right? Now, if you typically see how a lot of these BI tools work is that they have a staging area where data gets pushed in, and then the reports or the dashboards are built on top of it. Now, in a fast-paced world, like you talked about earlier, the importance of actually being able to look at data that is relevant to today is very important. And if you realize that you took a decision based on data that was some time back, then that trust gets eroded from data, and people sort of default to their personal bias and opinion. That's where the problem changes. Also, the ability to be able to distribute the data and make sure that visualization, the dashboard, is easily accessible to everyone. You can share that without them needing a specific software or interface like that. So be able to send us as a PDF periodically in a scheduled manner, so that it takes that human intervention required. Like somebody had to send a report at 4 p.m. every day and forgot, so nobody knew what the decision was, right? And increasingly, there's a trend that we're seeing, and we've seen this particularly in our product as well in Looker, is the ability to have a unit of analytics. Let's say it's a regression analysis or something like that. But the same interface can then be embedded in other products, which might not be originally part of the same product portfolio. So what that allows you to do is to people to be very familiar with the same data points. And with familiarity, people sort of then are naturally attuned to looking at the same set of interfaces. So the simpler the UX would be, if they look at it in the dashboard, in the CRM system, in their personal tracker, then it brings familiarity and just makes people think about it. And this is only amplified with the ability to adding low code and no code solutions as well. That really simplifies the ability to add that information. And the last part I wanted to call out was, and it sounds very obvious given this is a conversation about cloud, is to have these solutions that are cloud enabled. Now, this particularly became a big issue, as I realized over the last few months or few years now with the lockdown. The ability to have access to these reports, independent of whether you are in the office with the right level of access, right? Things were trapped inside office headquarters. You had to log in through VPN. VPN would only support a certain number of users. So be able to get access to that report so that the business continuity is maintained is important. So these are sort of the ideas I think that you could consider in terms of creating some great experiences there.
No, I think you rightly pointed out, right? Even in our experience of talking to some of the traditional legacy, very huge enterprises, right? There is no kind of visualizations or tools available to the leadership or a particular leader. If he just wants to know, like, again, going back to the example that I told, the sales of a particular product in a particular region for a particular period. Even today, we have seen they reach out to their subordinates or the admins who literally have to write a query for this, right? And then query the database to get this information, download it as an Excel or a report, and then send it back to them via mail, and then they will have to see it, right? which is, as you can see in this fast-paced world, data changes every time, and decisions need to be, course corrected very frequently. And then that brings me to the next question, which is again for you, Rajat, right? So the need of the hour is to have real-time data analytics to drive real-time and on-spot decision making, right? The yesteryear, analytics was based on the N-1 data, right? So today nobody wants that. It has to be the, as latest data as possible, which is going to drive the decisions that the organizations are going to take. So what kind of, solutions are there around the Google Cloud's ecosystem in order to help organizations basically get insights from the real-time data?
And it's interesting you mentioned that example. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day in a conversation, and this example came across like, could you look at the road, close your eyes, wait for a minute, and then cross the road with your eyes closed, right? And sort of the businesses today take decisions by taking a look at the data that was a snapshot from a fixed frequency, maybe 24 hours ago, right? Even though those decisions need to be taken on a very fast manner. The problem that typically organizations have is the coexistence of two kinds of data, right? Fast-moving real-time data, which requires its own sort of plumbing for data engineering point of view, and then slow-moving data, which is like monthly, weekly cycle, and so on. And the kind of plumbing required for these two sort of data points and the scale at which they need to operate is very, very different, and that creates a lot of complexity. So at Google Cloud, we've got different solutions that supports that, with BigQuery being like the source of truth in that sense. It has a feature called streaming inserts, and that allows you to be able to push in real-time events. So if there is clickstream events or anything of that nature, like telematics or patient records or anything like that that's coming at a fixed frequency, you can route it through PubSub, which is our global message queue system that can push into BigQuery, and then you can do analytics on top of it. And then there is the serverless unified processing framework as well, using Dataflow, which means that if you have a large chunk of data and you need to run ETL on it, you don't necessarily have to stand up servers that need to run 24/7 and wait for them to boot up for you to do the processing. Instead, they show up when the data shows up, does the processing at the right scale, and then it tears itself down. And here's one of the innovations from Google Cloud that comes into play significantly. Our typical boot time of VMs is in seconds compared to competition. Right? And what that really means is that if you had a 5-minute data transformation job, you wouldn't have to wait for 5 minutes for them to boot, then 5 minutes of that. Because the boot up time is so small, you actually pay for just the 5 minutes that it is doing the processing. That really reduces your cost of running the systems. So two things: it takes the data engineering complexity away from managing batch and streaming data, because it's the same set of tooling. And secondly, because of the technology that we have, boot times are much faster, and hence the cost that you pay is pretty much very close to the actual time spent on doing the job rather than waiting for the boot time and so on. Right? Again, just a reminder, these are tools that we solve for our own problems, and now we're making it available. So now the same innovation inside Google is in the hands of customers to then apply that innovation for their own organization as well.
Great insights. And I think we have been seeing that, like you rightly called out, like how Google products been using this, and pretty much everybody is experiencing them with products like YouTube or even Google Workspace and things like that, right? Moving on to the some of the implementation challenges, right? So a lot of these organizations, Rupesh, I'd probably request you to give some insights on this, right? So while yes, we can work very closely with our customers who are looking at starting their journey, help them draft the whole part of it, right? But once they start implementing it, right? How can we enable the customer teams, probably in the absence of a data scientist or a very strong data team, or probably what kind of managed services are available from within the Google system as well, and also as a partner, or as a consultant, like you call out, right? How can we help the customers basically in sustaining this journey that they've started and giving them the right directions for course correction? So what kind of managed services are available in the ecosystem to support this?
Sure, Bharath, excellent question. The right one for this kind of generation, or I would say that time slice, right? So we are all looking for data scientists to kind of help us realize the use cases, right? So many of these use cases are related to customers, and they are more of AI, machine learning type of use cases, right? So how do we get data scientists? There is this huge kind of a demand, and there is a low supply, and there is very limited talent available for data scientists, right? So this is kind of a topmost problem that we see with all industries, all clients, right? Saying that we want to do this, but how do we do it, right? So you're telling us that this is the use case around AI machine learning, which will help us improve efficiencies, improve the productivity, but where do we get the team for it, right? So there is a two-pronged approach here, right? So one is in terms of saying that you need to engage with the right company, right? The right partner who specializes in this area, right? So what they bring in to the table. So they bring in to a table maybe something like a COE, right? So we need to have like a center of excellence for analytics and AI ML, which is a specialized kind of a team who bring in the right processes, the right team in the form of people, as well as the right tools, right? So this is the first step I normally suggest, saying that you need to engage with a right partner who has the COE inbuilt, right? So they will bring in the expertise required to realize these use cases. Now, processes and people is what we talked about. Now, what about the tools, right? So the entire tool stack that we see now is with the advent of the cloud platforms, it has become much easier to do data science, AI, machine learning, right? So let me give out some few examples, right? So what we have is in the form of, suppose we are using computer vision as a tool, right? So this helps us realize something like use cases around reading unstructured data, semi-structured data across bills, images, right? So we have parsers readily available, which can read invoices, receipts, and, images, everything, right? So that is the first part. The second part is we have natural language capabilities out of the box from a cloud platform. So they can kind of, like Rajat talked about, they can talk about saying that what the customer is saying, what is the sentiment, what are the entities and intents in it, right? So, and then there is also a capability to translate this entire language, right? Be it any language spoken across the world, we have a capability to translate this, and this comes as APIs in the form of APIs which can be directly used. And the third area that we have seen and being used in multiple industries across clients is in terms of understanding videos, right? Understanding what is happening within a video. So this is also in the form of an API where we can detect natural scenes, objects, actors, celebrities, everything, right? So, so what has happened now? So we have got all the tools in place. Then there is also a customization possible in all of this, right? So it's not that you need to use the API. You can actually bring your own data into the platform. You can train it. You can do the prediction as per your needs, right? Use the right algorithm. In fact, the platform itself recommends which algorithm works for your use case, right? So we have pretty much the entire tool stack. Everything is coming in as a managed service, so you're not kind of, you're using it based on your use case, pay as you go kind of model, as well as the other side of it, right, where the company brings in the processes. How do we execute a data science project? So that is where the partner comes in, and I think that is working quite well in terms of both the areas working together to get the right processes, people, and the tools.
Bang on there. I think the managed service capabilities which Google provides, is taking care of a lot of it. And then, of course, the partners can do the heavy lifting, for the organizations where they can focus on their core business, that is, innovation and, coming up with the right features and the right products for their customers, while we can help them, do the whole prediction and the prescription part of it, right? So rightly pointed out there.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think we have about 10 minutes left. So what we'll do is we'll quickly jump to the case studies part of it. Let's discuss one or two case studies, and then I see a couple of questions that have come in. Maybe we can take it up, in the next 5 minutes. So quickly, Rajat, if you could give us some insights into, probably one or two case studies where customers have been successfully able to leverage the, Google's data analytics platform or the solutions that are available to make the right set of decisions much faster, right? So if you could throw some insights into that, I'm sure our audience would be eager to hear that part.
Yep, absolutely, Bharath, and that's the favorite part of the job, right? Being able to tell these stories of customer successes where they have done something which was sort of unimaginable with the technology that they were typically able to see in the market, and be able to solve for things that that had a big positive impact on the business. So I have two examples. One was from the FSI domain, so I'll cover that, and then there's one from the healthcare as well, which I think is quite pertinent and interesting to talk about, and builds upon what Rupesh talked about as well from managed services point of view. So the first one is a customer from the capital market, and here's an interesting insight, right? So they, quantitative analysis is basically looking at various signals that predicts how a particular stock is going to perform over a period of time. And one of the signals that they looked at was what is happening in the market, because capital markets are influenced a lot by sentiments, right? So they took upon us this challenge to say, can you help us parse some data? And they sort of talked about like, yeah, we have some data. And when we found out what data they were looking at 1.3 billion news articles, right? Some 30 years worth of data to look at and parse and understand what is this data talking about. And when that data was talked about, what was the terms called out? Was it positive, negative sentiment? Was it a big thing or a small thing? And what was the impact of that news item at the time on the stock price, right? So we were able to look at all of that data at scale and parse it, understand what that was, do a correlation with the stock price to build a machine learning model around it, right? And that machine learning model was then able to add a signal. And obviously nobody can predict what the stock price is going to be. Otherwise, you and I wouldn't be in this call right now.
Of course.
We
all would be trading there.
Absolutely, yes. But it was providing a very strong signal into what that input would look like. And quantitative analysis, as you can see, is a growing field in capital market and an exciting area to work on. The second one that I want to talk about was from the healthcare business. And this is a company which was focused on precision medicine. So this is like personalized medicine for a particular customer's disease rather than a common generic medicine. And this was for a company that was focused on the Alzheimer's disease. And what they were trying to do was to look at early onset of the Alzheimer protein plaque that accumulates in the brain and make a decision on when to start the treatment so that it can slow down the process. Obviously, there's no cure for it at this point. Right? Because by the time people recognize this, it's too late, and then there's not much you can do at that point. So the foundation shared us a bunch of data around looking at millions of electronic health records of customers over a period of time and be able to build multiple models around it. And Rupesh made an important point on data science and access to data scientists. Right? If you look at a typical model, the challenge is that you have to choose the data, read it at scale, choose what signals of the data are important and what is the weightage associated with the signals, and then also pick the right algorithm, right? And if you were to do that exercise humanly, you would have to choose a number of combinations, and given the resources and time we have, we'd only choose a finite number of sets, right? We have a capability called Automl, which basically automates that. So think about simplistically putting it in a for loop and say, I'll take all the feature sets, I'll take all the input parameters, and I'll run millions of computations to figure out which model will give me the highest level of accuracy, right? So what they did was they moved all the data from in-house to the GCP platform. We used data prep to prepare all the data so that we could convert that into a single format, pushed it all into BigQuery, and then analyze the data using visualization tools like Data Studio and Looker to figure out what the patterns were. And then once we understood what the feature sets were, what the signals were, we used that to build and train the model using AutoML at scale, and then pipe those machine learning models to then give the right kind of signals and be able to do that. So with that, it really reduced the amount of time that was spent on doing these kind of model building and development. They were from a healthcare side, they didn't really have much of an hiring from a computer science point of view, so they didn't have to invest a lot of time in that. More importantly, they didn't have to worry about HIPAA compliance, right? Because Google Cloud is already HIPAA compliance. They were able to store all of that information together. So that's sort of the mission that they had as an organization. They could solely focus on that and not worry too much about doing an upfront investment on technology to do what they were very good at. So those two ideas sort of should give an idea of the art of possible through analytics and Google Cloud.
I think you summarized it perfectly well, Rajat, right? So right from helping people make more money to helping people save lives, right? Data analytics, and especially the AutoML features of Google are helping in all of these areas. That's a wide coverage, to speak about. Thanks for that, Rajat. And Rupesh, I know Niveus Solutions been, helping drive a lot of these telematics and data, journeys for some of their clients, right? So quickly, if you could in the next 2-3 minutes cover 1 or 2 case studies, that would be really great.
Sure, Bharath. I just wanted to add on to what Rajat said, right? So signals. So I mean, the entire industry is kind of trying to see signals, right? One could be in the form of an anomaly for a news industry, saying that, okay, what has happened actually that suddenly everybody is kind of sharing this content, right? So it could be an anomaly, it could be some signal that people want to track, right, as a news or publishing house. So that could be one use case which the clients look for, right? Other, it could be in the form of an auto industry, right? In the so what we did some work for an auto client where it is pretty much along the same line what we discussed. It's like understanding driving patterns, right? Where does this come from? From the vehicle which the driver is using. So there is a lot of sensor data. There is a lot of IoT work that is being done to understand what a particular asset on the road, right? In this case, a vehicle on the road is actually telling us. So these are good times where we are able to analyze this, we are able to understand the driving patterns, and maybe do service recommendations, right? So we know exactly how the vehicle will do over the next few weeks, so that we could alert the particular owner, right? And also maybe in the future, this would be related to, and there are talks already happening in terms of how can the insurance be customized based on your driving behavior. So this is one case study that we wanted to talk about from an auto side. We have also been working in terms of how do we ensure that there is no breakdown happening for plants, right? So these are for manufacturing set of customers. So there is always this issue about, okay, I have this machine which has broken down. Now, how can I prevent this in the future? So is there a way to kind of look at all the machine data, sensor data, to understand the patterns of failure or breakdown, right? So this is the work that we have done for manufacturing clients, and this is kind of everybody out there wants to kind of protect their investment, right? So if predictive model can help you to kind of give you alerts saying that this machine is actually under stress, and you can actually take some actions, right, and provide some recommendations around it, that is what people are looking for. I just wanted to briefly touch upon some few other areas. One is around the media and entertainment industry, right? There is a lot of work going on in terms of translation, right? So from one language to another language, understanding doing the text to speech, speech to text. So these all things are quite relevant from a media and entertainment industry, and we have done that. And there are a lot of horizontal solutions across industry. One thing is around the knowledge transition itself, right? With COVID being there's a lot of transitions happening through Zoom calls, right? So if there is a way to automate this entire knowledge transition, like convert the entire speech that is happening, right, between the audiences into text and generate a kind of a transition document, that is something also the clients are looking for. So these are solutions in place. We are actually working with the clients, and these are all interesting use cases, Bharath.
Absolutely bang on, right? So see, like you mentioned, I think that's a great analogy or an example or a use case for where both prescriptive and predictive analytics plays a great role. You spoke about the automation, manufacturing part, right? Where one side you can give insights to your customers on how they can improve their driving so that their vehicle lasts longer or their spare parts last longer, which the customers will definitely appreciate from the customer servicing point of view, right? And on the other side, you're giving predictions, which is, of course, a prescriptive analytics, right? And on the other side, you're actually giving predictions to the spare part manufacturer, like, okay, depending on this usage that the customer is currently doing with all the users or all their customers, how can they ensure that the stocks are ready for the next service when they come in, and which particular part needs to be replaced for which car, right? So it's a win-win both for the customers as well as for the industry servicing it. I think that's a great example, right? So we've kind of coming to an end. So before I summarize this, let's take a couple of questions. I know there are 2-3 questions that have come in. One part, yes, right? How do you ensure data security and privacy? I, for a fact, know that in my experience of implementing analytic solutions from Google, to our customers, the myth about Google has your data is a myth, right? Your data is purely your data, right? And nobody from Google has access to any kind of data, both at rest and at transit, right? So Rajat, do you want to throw some more light on how the data and the security is handled? And I'm sure Google themselves are using all these security aspects for kind of securing their own data as well, right?
Absolutely, and data access is the highest importance internally in Google, and I cannot emphasize more on the various security controls we have in place across rest in transit and now in memory as well through confidential compute. So it's not just a matter of encrypting data, but also what happens to data when your CPU is actually taking all that data and doing some processing around it. So I mean, we talked about data warehousing solutions, data lake solutions at the top of the hour, and then effectively one of the things that we have from a security point of view there is being able to have access management at a column level of your data, right? And that's fairly unique in the industry because typically you would have access to a particular table, but here you can actually say which columns they would have access to, right? There is that. Obviously, there's a whole sphere of encryption, right from the default encryption that Google Cloud provides, all the way up to using your own keys and using hardware level encryption. But the interesting fact around encryption is that Google Cloud, the default encryption itself is fairly complicated, right? The way it works is it has chunks of your data. Each chunk of the data is encrypted using its own key, and that key is then encrypted by a secondary key. Now we've kind of perfected this art of being able to encrypt and decrypt on the fly without you even noticing any performance penalty. But that's really what that level of security is. Even if one of those keys is accidentally leaked out, which frankly has never happened in the past, then also there's only a small tiny bit of data that gets exposed, if at all, right? But the rest of the data is still inaccessible. So that is the level of security and privacy that we have. So giving two dimensions. And the last part is around data loss prevention. So this is something that we look very seriously as well. And for compliance reasons and the ability to be able to mask data, we have a data loss prevention API. And it is fairly conversant with the data types relevant to India. So it understands PAN card, Aadhaar card, bank account numbers, and not just their social security number and so on. So Google Cloud India, made for India, understands what is relevant for India and makes that provided as well. Right? So,
absolutely. There's another question which says, I want to know the future of implementation of data. I believe pretty much what we spoke about is looking at where how data can be used in future to make these predictions and prescriptive analytics, right? So I'm not quite sure what exactly you want to understand from that, but any thoughts on that, Rupesh or Rajat? Future of implementation of data.
Sure. I think we briefly touched upon this. I think it is going to be conversational AI, right? So that is the future of data. So we are used to WhatsApp, we are used to chats, right? So what if we can actually talk to our data, right? So I mean, say that data comes in as a bot to us, and every day morning says that this is what is happening with your data, and this is good for you, this is bad for you. Categorizes it properly for us so that we can take appropriate actions. As I said, it's right now very transactional in nature, but I think it will become very analytical in the future in terms of saying that, this is your past trend, this is your entire history, and this is what I could make out of this, right? And it comes in a very simple, easy to use interface. So I think those are the future trends that will come up definitely with all the data we have.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we did touch upon that part. So thanks for reminding that, Rupesh. So I think we've almost 4:03. I think we've come to an end of it. I see a couple more questions, but probably what you can do is shoot us these questions, and we'd be more than happy to get back to you with detailed answers for those. Yes, you will get a form to fill after the session, which you can please fill and share it. We would know the feedback as well. So to summarize, so what we did is we spoke about the challenges and the trends that are there, while an organization has to start their data journey, what kind of data they will have to look at, how should they plan for the data strategy, one is at the org level and also at the business unit levels, and then have both short-term and long-term goals, right? And then we spoke about the best practices, how it is important to have democratized data, right? Which would enable every sections to make, their own decisions, again, aligned with the the final organizational goals. We spoke about the, what are the various tools available in the ecosystem of Google, BigQuery, Data Prep, Data Proc, visualization tools and analytics tools like Looker, and what are the key differentiators. And of course, the case studies, how, like I said, from making money to saving lives, how Google has been helping in all these areas, and the importance of course, skilled partners in the implementation journey, so that the organizers, can basically focus on their key objective of the products and the features rather than worrying, and leave the heavy lifting on the prescriptive and predictive analytics to the partners. So I think we've tried and covered the topic that we had to discuss today. So once again, thanks a lot, Rajat, for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I think all the insights would be useful to all our audience today. And thanks, Rupesh, for sharing those insights and also the future of data as well, right? So once again, thanks a lot for your participation, and stay safe and have a good day. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.